April 3, 1942. North Atlantic, roughly 200 nautical miles southeast of Greenland. A black deck of sea stretched to the horizon. The sky was a coal slate ceiling studded with dying stars. The cold tasted like metal and salt, and the crew of U-421 breathed it in through wool scarves and cracked lips. You are standing on the weather deck beside Kapitänleutnant Hans Berger. Small, lean, his cap pulled low, a cigarette pinched between fingers that smell of engine oil. The Type 7 sits low in the water, its bow slapping the sea as the watch calls out bearings. Behind you, the pressure hull thrums, the slow, confident heartbeat of 50 men who have been told they are the hunters of the Atlantic. On the conning tower, the periscope is a dark glass eye. Below, the boat's Enigma sits on its table like a talisman, its rotor lamps blinking in the dim. Through the hydrophones, the listening room reports activity, distant, muffled, the steady clank of an escort's propeller and, more importantly, the higher, more complex pattern of a convoy's many engines. Berger grins as if he can already taste the fuel oil of victory. "Americans," he says in a voice sharpened by cold and triumph. 3 columns, easy targets. He tosses the cigarette butt where it scatters on the iron deck and laughs. The men around him laugh too, a short, rough sound that has become noise in itself after months of nights like this. Below, Oberleutnant Jose Karl Mayer kneels by the chart table, fingers tracing convoy tracks on a paper map. He calls coordinates in crisp German, and the radioman nods, fingers already dancing on the transmitter to pass the sighting to Befehlshaber der Unterseeboote. There is a ritual to this sight-shadow report. There is a deeper ritual, too. The jokes that circulate through the crew about Uncle Sam's slow grocery runs, the mocking toasts to the little gray freighters that lumber across the Atlantic as if they are asleep. They are wolves in the night. The convoys are sheep. That is how it has been for 2 years. The deck gun clanks as the bosun inspects it. Outside, a faint glow of running lights betrays the distant column, a string of yellow beads drifting southwest. Berger cups the binoculars to his eyes, the lenses fogging in the cold, and speaks like a man who has been invited to a banquet. 2 freighters abreast, 1 tanker in the rear. Minimal escort, 1 destroyer, 1 corvette. They won't even know we are here until the torpedoes wake them. Inside the hull, the crew moves with the easy confidence of men rehearsed in violence. Torpedoes slid into racks like sleeping dogs. The mechanisms checked, the gyro angles set. The sound of boots on steel, the clatter of tools, the murmur of voices. All ordinary, almost domestic, against the extraordinary business they are about to do. Petty Officer Klaus Richter jokes with the gunner about the quality of American rum and the size of their bellies. They mock not because they are cruel. They mock because in the dark, mockery is armor. At 1:20, the watch reports the convoy's exact bearing. The Type 7 slips beneath the waves, the conning tower disappearing, the world above reduced to muffled light and the thin, distorted music of the hydrophones. Underwater, the boat becomes an instrument tuned to one purpose, to slice and vanish. Berger stands at the periscope like a surgeon's hand on a scalpel. He orders speed, calculates intercept and time, and in the dark calculus of the ocean, the men place their bets. They attack at night by tradition and by design. Under the curve of the sea at periscope depth, Oberleutnant Meyer fingers the rangefinder and calls out numbers that mean life or death. 350 meters, 2 minutes to firing solution. The torpedo officer, a stoic with a scar nicking his cheek, gives the nod. The rank, the routine, the clatter of lever and latch, then the hollow, thunderless release as steel slips into black water and starts its slow, murderous crawl toward the freighter's flank. Minutes stretch thin. On the radio, men exchange a string of dry humor about how many whistles the Americans will blow. For a long instant, the crew lives suspended between the volume of their confidence and the silence of the ocean. Then the first impact, a dull internal concussion felt through ribs of steel. Below decks, men who had been joking stop mid-sentence. The boat lists slightly as the shock rolls along the hull. Someone utters a prayer, someone swears, someone improbably laughs. Victory, immediate but messy. A mast heeling like a fallen tree. A flare stabbing the night sky. Men on deck clambering through smoke as the black water closes in. Berger allows himself one more look at the twinkling convoy. The light haloed by the flare, then orders the crew to submerge and run silent. They have a way out. They always seem to at this stage. and the men's mockery returns like a reflexive shield. The destroyer picks up a sound on its ASDIC and sends a ping that the hydrophones register as a thin, clinical tapping. "Sound contact," whispers the listening officer, but the tone is not panicked. The U-boat has been through this before. They believe the ocean is theirs. The Allies are the ones still learning the map. Later, down in the cramped mess over black coffee and thin slices of bread, the men trade stories, teeth-bared, grandiose accounts of previous night's hunts. Conversations flirt with hubris. "They convoy like ducks," says Petty Officer Richter, "and we are the fox." Someone passes around a small scrap of paper with caricatures of American sailors, and the boat erupts with laughter. It is late. The diesel engines hum. The world spins in a lullaby of machinery and seawater, and the men sleep with the easy confidence of those who have been told they are invincible. Outside, the sea is an indeterminate, heaving dark. Inside, the U-boat creaks with smug certainties. For now, they mock. For now, the Atlantic answers back with bounty. But beneath the jokes and the cigarette smoke, there are changes that none of them can see in the black. New radars glinting on distant escort masts, aircraft with longer range rising higher above storm clouds, and sonar operators learning the ocean's language with a clarity that will become, in months to come, a very cold, very tidy way of turning hunters into the hunted. The laughter of U-421's crew fades beneath the hum of the engines. Days pass. The ocean remains indifferent, but somewhere beyond the gray horizon the tides of war are shifting. May 9th, 1943. North Atlantic, 400 miles south of Iceland. The surface temperature hovers just above freezing and visibility is poor, fog rolling like smoke over steel-gray water. Inside the control room of U-421, condensation drips from the rivets, pattering onto the worn linoleum floor. The men no longer laugh as loudly as they used to. For weeks now, the reports coming through the Enigma have carried a different tone. Words like Verlustrike, heavy losses, keep appearing. Convoys that once lost half their freighters now cross almost untouched. Something is wrong, though no one aboard dares say it aloud. Berger stands at the plotting table, the red light painting his face in hollow shadows. His eyes move over the convoy chart. HX-237, an Allied convoy bound for Liverpool. They've been tracking it for 2 days, creeping north to intercept. It should have been routine. But last night, another U-boat, U-640, went silent. No signal, no distress call. Nothing, just gone. Oberleutnant Meyer, ever cautious, breaks the silence. "They have new tricks, Herr Kapitän." Berger doesn't look up. "New tricks don't change physics," he says. "We stay below the layer, they can't see us," but Meyer's jaw tightens. He's been listening to rumors from Lorient, of new Allied radar that can pick up even a periscope head, of aircraft fitted with magnetic anomaly detectors, of destroyers whose sonar pings are sharper, clearer, deadlier. The U-boat rises to periscope depth. Meyer steadies the lens, scanning. The fog shifts like a veil. For a heartbeat, the sea is empty. Then faintly, a flicker of light on the horizon. A convoy, 4 columns wide, freighters, oilers, Liberty ships, and guarding them the unmistakable silhouettes of escorts, corvettes and destroyers cutting through the mist like watchful wolves. Surface for attack. Berger orders. Nightfall will be our cover. Hours pass. Darkness descends. The men ready the torpedoes in silence. The air stinks of diesel, sweat, and nerves. The boat breaks the surface just after midnight. The ocean feels alive, restless, listening. The moon hides behind a smear of cloud. The first shot goes clean. Torpedo 1, then 2. The hiss of compressed air, the faint shudder of release. Both run true. A distant freighter erupts in orange fire, a thunderous bloom of flame and fuel oil. Cheers echo down the narrow hull. For a fleeting instant, it feels like the old days again. Then, the sound that freezes every man in place. Ping. Soft at first, almost polite. Then another. Louder. More precise. The destroyer has them. Dive. Schnell dive. Berger barks. The hull groans as the U-boat plunges beneath the surface. Gauges tremble. Depth 30 meters. 50, 80, the pinging grows sharper, quicker. A hunter closing in on its prey. The hydrophone operator's hands shake as he adjusts the dials. 2 contacts, 3, closing fast. A sudden, distant explosion ripples through the water. A depth charge and then another closer this time. The lights flicker. Bolts rattle loose from the ceiling. Someone mutters a prayer. Berger grips the periscope housing, knuckles white. Hold depth at 90 meters, he says through clenched teeth. The chief engineer nods, sweat beading on his temple. The U-boat shudders again as a string of depth charges detonates above. Metal screams. A pipe burst, spraying hot steam. And then, just as suddenly as it began, silence. Only the creak of metal, the slow breath of the ocean pressing down. Minutes crawl by. The men exchange looks, and not of triumph, but of disbelief. They missed, whispers Richter, almost reverent. But Meyer doesn't join in. He stands still, staring at the condensation running down the bulkhead like tears. No, he murmurs, voice low. They're learning. Hours later, when U-421 finally surfaces, the sea is empty. The convoy is gone. But above them, faintly, a searchlight sweeps the clouds. Not from a destroyer, but from a plane. It's a Liberator, one of the new long-range patrol bombers. Silent, circling, watching. Berger's confidence falters for the first time. Flak ready, he orders, voice tight. But even as the gunners scramble to their posts, the Liberator dives, its engines howling like a descending storm. The night sky flashes. Flares, tracers, the concussive roar of depth charges dropped from the air. The U-boat jerks, corkscrews, dives again. The Atlantic swallows it whole. For the next 3 hours, the crew fights for their lives in a blind, suffocating darkness while sonar pings echo all around them like the ticking of a clock running out. By dawn, U-421 survives, battered, leaking, half the crew bleeding from burst eardrums and broken ribs. The air stinks of oil and fear. No one laughs anymore. Somewhere far above, the convoy steams on untouched. For the first time, the German wolves realize the sea no longer belongs to them. The gray dawn rises over a wounded U-421. Inside the submarine, the men move like ghosts, each carrying the silent understanding that something fundamental has shifted. June 1943. Lorient Submarine Base, occupied France. The pens are dark cathedrals of concrete, vast echoing chambers built to be invincible. The air smells of diesel, rust, and despair. U-boats that return now limp into port like beaten animals, their hulls gashed, their crews gaunt and haunted. U-421 lies tied alongside the quay, its conning tower blackened with soot. The crew disembarks in silence, boots scraping the wet concrete. Dockhands stare at them, not with admiration as before, but with pity. The myth of the unsinkable wolfpack is cracking. Captain Lieutenant Berger walks ahead, coat soaked with salt water. His face is hollow, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Inside the command bunker, Admiral Karl Donitz's staff stands around a wall map pricked with red and blue pins. The Atlantic, once thick with confident U-boat markers, now crowded with black crosses. Lost. An officer reads the latest figures in a voice that wavers between disbelief and denial. 41 U-boats lost in May alone. 34 confirmed in June. A silence follows that feels heavier than the sea itself. The Admiral's aide, a young lieutenant with ink-stained fingers, gestures to new intelligence photos on the wall. They show a convoy seen from above, grainy and distant, yet unmistakable. Radar shadows of U-boats caught on the surface, boxed in by corvettes, their wakes converging like a net. The Allies have eyes now. Radar sets fitted on aircraft and escort ships that can see through fog and night. They have ears sharper than ever, sonar tuned to every whisper of cavitation, every brush of a propeller blade. And worst of all, they have numbers. The Black Pit, that stretch of mid-Atlantic once beyond Allied air cover, is shrinking by the day. Long-range B-24 Liberators patrol it now, circling with lethal patience. Where once U-boats stalked convoys unseen, now they are the ones hunted from above. Berger listens as Donitz himself enters the room, the man once worshipped by every submariner as the Lion of the Atlantic. But even he looks diminished. His uniform is immaculate, his voice steady, but his eyes betray fatigue. The enemy has adapted faster than we anticipated, Donitz says. They have new technology and they cooperate now. Air, sea, and radar, one chain of detection. He pauses, letting that sink in. We will adapt too. We have to. Berger glances toward the window where the rain beads on the reinforced glass. Beyond it, mechanics swarm over battered boats, patching hulls riddled with shrapnel. He knows what adapt means. Longer patrols, deeper dives, slimmer chances. That night he sits with his surviving crew in the mess hall. It's quiet, save for the scrape of cutlery and the low hum of the generators. Someone turns on the radio, the BBC's signal bleeding faintly through the static. English words drift into the room. U-boat losses continue to mount. The announcer's tone is clinical, detached, almost merciful. Meyer, his second in command, stares into his tin mug. "They're not afraid of us anymore," he says. Berger doesn't answer. He's remembering the night on the Atlantic when the sky burned white with searchlights, when his own boat shuddered like a living thing under the pressure of explosions. He remembers the pings, those cold, unrelenting notes of the Allied sonar, and realizes with a chill that they are the new rhythm of this war. Still, orders are orders. 2 weeks later, U-421 sails again. The crew boards without ceremony. No one makes jokes about easy targets or fat convoys now. The men check and recheck every valve, every switch, every hatch. The smell of fear lingers like oil. As the submarine slips out of the harbor and into open water, the shoreline fades. Above them, the sky is the color of dull pewter. The Atlantic is waiting, as it always does, and wide, indifferent, ancient. But now, it's watching too. Hours into the patrol, the hydrophone operator catches a faint pulse on the edge of audibility. A rhythmic sweep, alien but precise. Not natural. Not random. It's radar. The Allies are searching even here in what used to be safe darkness. Berger lowers his binoculars. The sea is calm, deceptively calm. He knows the next strike won't come from the surface, and it will come from the sky. Somewhere above the clouds, an aircraft crew is already tracing a line toward them, guided by invisible signals, relentless and exact. He whispers the words no German U-boat commander ever wanted to say. "We are being hunted." The phrase spreads through the control room like a chill. Every man feels it, the weight of inevitability pressing down. The hunters of the Atlantic have become prey. The words "we are being hunted" echo through the steel corridors of U-421. The men feel the truth of it in their bones, in the way the sea itself seems to listen. June 18, 1943. Mid-Atlantic. The sea is calm, unnervingly calm, under a washed-out morning sky. The sun glints weakly off 1,000 ripples. U-421 runs surfaced. Batteries recharging, diesel engines rumbling with the steady pulse of machinery and dread. Berger stands in the conning tower, scanning the horizon through his binoculars. The air tastes of salt and diesel exhaust. Around him, the watch crew squints into the bright haze. It feels too quiet and not peaceful, but staged. Like the ocean is holding its breath. Clear skies, reports Meyer from below. No radar detected. But in the radio shack, the petty officer hears faint static. Not ordinary static, but a distinct mechanical hum, rising and falling. A signal. He frowns, adjusts the tuner, listens again. Then he freezes. Aircraft radar. 10-centimeter band. Berger's head snaps around. Distance? Close. Very close. A shadow flickers across the waves. Fast, wide, brief. Then another. The lookout barely has time to shout, "Flugzeug!" before the first roar tears through the air. The men on deck look up and see it. A shape descending out of the morning light, sunlight flashing on its wings. A consolidated B-24 Liberator, low and fast, its bomb bay doors yawning open. Crash dive. Alarm, the klaxon screams. Boots hammer against the deck plates as men scramble for the hatch. The U-boat's hull tilts, the diesel engines roaring as ballast tanks flood. The sea climbs the conning tower, swallowing the men's shouts. Within seconds, the periscope and deck vanish beneath a violent churn of foam. Inside, the boat tilts sharply, diving at a dangerous angle. Gauges rattle, papers fly, the air fills with the scent of metal and fear. At 30 meters, the first explosion hits. The sound isn't so much heard as felt. A brutal, bone-deep concussion that slams through the hull and knocks men off their feet. A second follows closer. Lights flicker, glass shatters. Depth 90. "Hold her steady!" Berger shouts. The helmsman fights the controls, sweat stinging his eyes. The boat groans like something alive, then in silence again. Only the hiss of escaping air and the creak of the hull. Status? Berger demands. "Minor leaks in compartments 2 and 4, Meyer replies, voice trembling. "Hydrophone's still functional. Keep us quiet." No noise, no bubbles. They wait. The air grows thick with sweat and oil fumes. The only sound is the ticking of the clock and the slow, ghostly drip of water. Minutes crawl into hours. The Liberator circles above, methodical. Through the hydrophones, the crew hears faint propeller noise fading, returning, fading again. The enemy is patient. He doesn't need to see them, he just needs to listen. Suddenly, the pings return. Not from a ship this time, but a sharper echo, bouncing from the seabed to the hull and back again. It's new. Allied sonobuoys, floating microphones dropped from aircraft. The sound creeps closer. Then, another explosion. The hull groans. A pipe bursts in compartment 3. Steam fills the corridor, burning skin and lungs. Someone screams. In the control room, Berger's hands tremble on the periscope handle. "Hold course, damn it!" "We can't." Meyer shouts. "She's taking water." Berger's jaw tightens. Then blow ballasts and prepare to surface. It's suicide, but the only chance they have. The engineer slams the levers forward. Compressed air roars through the tanks. The submarine lurches upward, shedding depth like a wounded animal clawing toward the light. They breach the surface in an eruption of foam and steam. The sky is a brutal white glare. The Liberator is waiting. It swoops low, engine snarling. The gunners on deck scramble to the flak guns, firing wildly. Tracers arc through the air, bright, hopeless streaks. The bomber passes overhead, drops its load. 4 depth charges fall in perfect alignment, exploding in a thunderous chain just meters off the starboard side. The blast lifts U-421 half out of the water. The pressure wave crushes the conning tower railing. Shards of steel and blood rain down. The boat slams back into the sea. For a moment it floats, smoking, crippled. Then the bow dips slowly, inevitably. Below deck, the compartments flood. Water rushes in cold and fast. The emergency lights flicker out. Berger stumbles through the chaos, shouting orders no one can hear. He finds Meyer pinned under a fallen pipe. Their eyes meet. No words. Only the shared knowledge of an ending. The Atlantic roars around them. The hull splits, groaning like a dying animal. Then, with one final shudder, U-421 slides beneath the surface. The sea closes over it without ceremony on the horizon. The Liberator circles once, watching the spreading oil slick. Then banks toward the convoy it was protecting. In the radio logs of the Royal Air Force, the entry is brief and bloodless. B-24 Liberator H-120. Attack on surfaced U-boat. Position 52 to Gren, 28 to Grub-U. Oil and wreckage sighted. Enemy destroyed. But in the deep, the Atlantic keeps its secrets. And the last bubbles of U-421 rise like ghosts, vanishing into the cold silence that swallows all things. The last breath of U-421 disappears into the dark. Above, the sky clears and the Atlantic seems once again calm. Too calm, as if nothing at all has happened. But the silence hides a revolution. Summer 1943. Western approaches. Royal Navy Coastal Command Headquarters, Plymouth, England. The war room hums with the mechanical rhythm of typewriters and teletype machines. Maps cover the walls. The entire Atlantic crisscrossed with colored strings, pins, and wax pencil circles. Commander Douglas Fairbanks of the Royal Navy bends over one of those maps, pipe clenched between his teeth, listening as a young radar technician explains the new system. The machine behind them, the ASV Mark III radar set, emits a steady hum. Its cathode ray display glows faintly green, a single line sweeping around the dial like a heartbeat. Fairbanks squints. "You're telling me that with this we can see them even when they're under cloud cover?" The technician nods. "Up to 15 miles, sir. We pick up the periscope or the snorkel, anything that breaks the surface. They can't hide in the fog anymore." Fairbanks exhales through his nose. "Good. Let's make sure they learn that. This is the new war, not fought by brute force alone, but by data, frequencies, and numbers. Every ship, every aircraft, every operator becomes a node in a vast, coordinated net that stretches across the ocean. In another room, sonar operators listen through headsets to the steady ping and echo of their ASDIC sets. Each ping maps the sea's invisible world, revealing shapes once lost to darkness. The younger operators, barely 20 years old, can now distinguish the difference between a whale, a wreck, and a submarine by ear alone. At RAF Ballykelly in Northern Ireland, a squadron of B-24 Liberators sits lined up on the tarmac. Mechanics swarm over them, checking the newly fitted lee lights, massive high-intensity lamps slung under the fuselage. These lights, combined with radar, have turned the night into an allied ally. When a radar contact appears, the pilot swoops in low and flicks the light on at the last second, blinding, exposing, and destroying. One of those pilots, Flight Lieutenant George Latham, writes in his logbook, "They call us angels of death, but it feels more like turning on the light in a dark room. The U-boat sits there, suddenly naked, its crew staring up at us like ghosts who just realized they're already dead. Convoy escorts too are evolving. New Hedgehog launchers, forward-firing anti-submarine mortars, have replaced depth charges for close combat. Unlike their predecessors, these weapons detonate only on contact, allowing escorts to keep sonar contact uninterrupted. It's precision where before there was guesswork. Aboard HMS Starling, Captain Frederick John Walker, the Royal Navy's most feared U-boat hunter, stands on the bridge with his binoculars raised. His ship cuts through the gray Atlantic, part of a support group, a new tactic that no longer leaves convoy escorts tied to static defense. Instead, they roam freely, hunting down any submarine foolish enough to make contact. Walker's voice is calm but firm. "Hold the line steady, lads. We'll catch him yet," his Aztec officer calls out. "Ping! Contact bearing 220. Range closing." "Steady as she goes," Walker replies. Engines half ahead. The Starling's Hedgehog launcher belches fire. A second later at impact, the sea erupts. A plume of oil rises, spreading black fingers across the surface. Cheers echo across the deck. Below, in the control room, an exhausted young sailor looks up from the sonar console and mutters, "That's one less of them." The ocean that once belonged to Germany's Kriegsmarine has become a chessboard where every move is anticipated. In Bletchley Park, British codebreakers continue to tear through intercepted Enigma messages, feeding convoy routes and U-boat patrol grids straight to Coastal Command. What once took weeks now takes hours. Every radio transmission from a U-boat becomes its death warrant. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American engineers refine their airborne radar systems and develop sonobuoys that can detect submarines from the air. Tiny, floating microphones dropped by the hundreds into convoy routes. Together with escort carriers, small, fast, bristling with aircraft, the Allies now blanket the ocean in steel and signal. By the autumn of 1943, the numbers tell the story. In May, 41 U-boats were lost. By June, it was 34. By September, 62 more had gone to the bottom. Admiral Dunitz, staring at those figures in his headquarters, finally issues the order: withdraw all U-boats from the North Atlantic. For the first time in years, the convoys steam safely from New York to Liverpool, their decks crowded with tanks, trucks, and fuel, the lifeblood of the Allied war effort. The hunters have been beaten not by luck but by learning. The Allies have done what the Germans once did best. They have adapted, evolved, and refined the art of war into something mathematical, clinical, and devastatingly effective. The Atlantic, once ruled by the silent predators of the deep, now hums with radar, sonar, and aircraft engines. The darkness that once shielded the wolf packs has been burned away by light, literal and technological, and somewhere beneath those waves, the wreck of U-421 lies cold and crushed, its steel bones bearing silent witness to the moment the tide of the Atlantic truly turned. The Atlantic is no longer a graveyard for Allied convoys. It has become a hunter's domain, a living machine of radar, sonar, and strategy. Yet beneath its cold skin, thousands of steel tombs sleep, silent and forgotten. Winter, 1944, Norwegian Sea. The war is turning against Germany everywhere. In the east, the Red Army is pushing west. In the west, Allied bombers darken the sky. But in the North Atlantic, the last remnants of the U-boat arm still prowl the depths, ghosts refusing to accept extinction. Among them is U-977, commanded by Oberleutnant zur See Heinz Schäfer. Younger than Berger, hardened by stories of men like him, Schäfer stands in the same conning tower once romanticized by Nazi propaganda posters. But the mood is different now, grim, deliberate. No more songs, no more laughter. The crews that remain know what awaits them. The sea around them is black and still. Ice crusts the deck, creaking under boots. The horizon is a smudge of pale light. Somewhere beyond it, Allied aircraft patrol endlessly. Schäfer peers through his binoculars but sees nothing. The danger, he knows, comes from what can't be seen. Below deck, the crew moves with quiet precision. There's no bravado, no jokes. Just the ritual of survival. Checking valves, scanning for radar emissions, whispering sonar reports. Every ping from above feels like fate knocking on the hull. Surface contact, reports the hydrophone operator. Bearing 030, slow-moving, could be a trawler. Or a corvette, Schäfer hesitates. Once he would have gone on the attack without a second thought. Now he weighs the odds. The sonar pings in the distance, faint but distinct. The enemy is always there, listening. Dive to 80 meters, he says quietly. Silent running. The engines shift from diesel to electric. The hum softens. Every man lowers his voice. Even breathing feels too loud. For an hour, they drift beneath the Arctic water, the hull groaning under pressure. A sonar ping sweeps past, sharp surgical. Another follows closer. Scheffer's knuckles whiten around the periscope stand. Then, the first depth charge. A muffled, crushing boom. Dust falls from the seams. A second closer. The lights flicker. Someone crosses himself. The U-boat shudders, taking on water. Scheffer closes his eyes for a moment. Not in fear, but in resignation. This is what it has come to. Steel against science, instinct against instruments. Hold her steady, he whispers. We'll wait them out. The attacks continue for an eternity. Then gradually the echoes fade. The corvette moves on, fooled by silence. Scheffer exhales. They live, for now. Later in the officer's mess, little more than a narrow table under red lights, Scheffer writes in his logbook, "We are no longer wolves. We are ghosts moving through a graveyard of our own making." He's not wrong. Across the Atlantic, the once proud U-boat arm has been decimated. Of the 1,162 submarines that Germany built during the war, over 780 will never return. More than 28,000 sailors, 2/3 of all who served, are lost at sea. And yet, even in defeat, there's a grim respect for them, from enemies and allies alike. Men who faced the crushing pressure of the deep, who fought in silence and darkness, who died unseen. Spring, 1945. The war in Europe ends. The surviving U-boats, battered and starving, limp into Allied ports with white flags hoisted. One by one they are surrendered, their crews lined up on deck, weary, hollow-eyed. The proud wolf insignias are painted over, the decks scrubbed clean of identity. The Atlantic finally exhales. Months later, in a secret operation known as Deadlight, the Royal Navy tows more than 100 surrendered U-boats out into the open ocean and scuttles them, detonated by explosives, riddled with shells, sunk in rows like fallen dominoes. The sea swallows them with quiet efficiency. One after another, the last of the wolf pack disappears into the gray depths. No hymns, no markers, no memorials. Only oil, bubbles, and silence. And somewhere down there, perhaps beside the twisted wreck of U-421, lie the remnants of an empire that once mocked its enemies and believed itself untouchable. The laughter of those early crews has long since vanished, replaced by the cold hum of sonar pings that still echo faintly through the ocean's heart. In the decades to come, divers will find the wrecks, perfectly preserved in the cold, oxygen-starved deep. Coffee cups still on tables, leather jackets still hanging by bunks, clocks frozen at the moment of destruction. They will speak of them not as monsters but as men, young, frightened, and swallowed by a war that turned the vast Atlantic into a chessboard of sound and death. The hunters became the hunted. The ocean kept its secrets. And the silence that followed was not peace, only the deep, eternal quiet of those who vanished beneath the waves.